Hello everyone, welcome to Cloud Pathshala. In this video, we would be discussing Linux fundamentals. This would be the first video in this series where we would be discussing multiple Linux commands and the basics that are needed for a day-to-day job of a DevOps engineer or an SRE. To begin with, let's see what Linux is. Linux is a family of open source Unix operating system based on the Linux kernel. They include different operating systems like Ubuntu, CentOS, Fedora, Debian, OpenSUSE, that is also called as SUSE Linux, and we have Red Hat, which also has CentOS under it. When operating Linux, we need to use a shell, a program that gives you access to the operating system services that are running inside the system. Now, in order to access these services remotely, we have to log into the virtual machine, and that process of logging into the virtual machine is done by SSH. SSH is nothing but secure shell which we can use to log into a remote Linux machine. Now let's try to see what are the different syntaxes that we have in order to log into a virtual machine. The first syntax that we see over here is with the username and the password. For this to work, we actually should be having a local user that is created in the Linux server or the virtual machine and a password associated with that server. So the command is ssh space, we provide the username @ and then the host address. Now the host address could be either the IP address or the DNS name of the server. So let's quickly try to see the first method by looking at how we could achieve that. So for this, I already have VirtualBox installed on my system. I would power on the virtual machine that I have and then would try to connect to this VM using my terminal. In this case, I'm using the terminal MovaX term for logging into the machine. As you see, the SSH console is coming up, but we would not be using that. Instead, be using the SSH console. So the syntax goes as ssh space the username. In this case, I am running a Ubuntu virtual machine, so the username would be Ubuntu, and then I would provide the IP address. I am falling back to 127.0.0.1, which is my local IP address, and I would be providing a specific port at which I would be logging into this virtual machine. So I provide the option -p and 2222, and as you see, this is asking me for the password for this virtual machine. I punch in the password, hit enter after that, and this should take me inside the virtual machine where I could see the details of the OS. As you see, I am running Ubuntu 20.04.4 LTS version that is available with me. Now this was the first syntax or the first method in which we can log into a Linux machine. This is basically using the username and the password. Now there is another syntax or another method in which we can log into the virtual machine or the Linux OS. Now this is with the same username, but this time we would be providing an authentication key along with the SSH. The syntax is pretty much the same, wherein the syntax goes as ssh space the username @ the host address. In this case, the address could either be the DNS entry or the IP address itself, and then we provide -i for the identity file and then provide the path for the file. Let's quickly check to see how we could achieve that. For this, I am already having a Linux machine in my AWS console. This is the IP address that I hold for this. I would be going to a new window, and and this time I would be going into the directory where my keys are available, and I would be doing ssh space the username. In this case, the username would be ec2-user because I'm using an Amazon Linux virtual machine on the cloud, and then the IP address. Then I would be providing the identity file, and I could get the key information from the AWS console itself, which is this .pem. I would not be providing any port. In this case, the port that which would be used to connect would be 22. So SSH by default works on port number 22. In the earlier case, we did use a specific port to log into the machine because I have enabled port forwarding on the local VM, whereas because the Linux virtual machine on the cloud is not having any port forwarding or any proxies before it, so we directly would have connected to the VM on port number 22. As you see, we have already connected into the virtual machine, and this is Amazon Linux AMI. So we are inside the virtual machine. Now these are the two methods in which we connected to the virtual machine in Linux. The first is using the combination of username and a password. The other is using a combination of username and an authentication key. Sudo is one of the most popular basic Linux commands that lets you perform tasks that require administrative or root permissions on the system. When using sudo, the system will prompt users to authenticate themselves with a password. Then Linux system will log a timestamp as a tracker. By default, every root user can run sudo commands for about 15 minutes per session. If you try to run sudo in the command line without authenticating yourself, the system will log the activity as a security event on the system, that is either your Linux machine or your Linux server, and this would be flagged in as a security risk. Now the general syntax that we have for sudo is we type sudo and then a command followed by sudo. It could be anything. We also have some options available with that we can punch in when using the sudo command, that is -k for resetting the timestamp, -g for groups, which runs commands as a specific group name or a group ID, and -h which runs commands on the host. Let's quickly look at some practical things related to the sudo command and see what the difference is. For this, I am already logged into my Ubuntu virtual machine, and if you see, I am logged in with the user Ubuntu. If I have to update anything on the server, I need to do an apt-get, and if you see that it is saying that I don't have permissions and saying that the permission is denied for this user Ubuntu. In order to navigate through this, I need to have sudo privileges to run the same set of commands. If I do a sudo apt-get update, it would ask me for the password of Ubuntu user. I could type in the password for the Ubuntu user, and this would then initiate the update for you. As you see, if we ran the same command apt-get update without the sudo command, it actually gave us an error saying that the user, in this case Ubuntu, does not has the valid permissions in order to read certain files and open or create some logs. Instead, when we ran it with the sudo command, we were able to download the patches and update apt-get. Now this is a simple sudo example that we see in front of us. Now most users always, instead of typing the sudo every time, what people also do is sudo su. This actually switches the user to a root user. Now if you see that we from the user Ubuntu we have already come into the root user, and here I could run any command without running sudo, and this should work as usual. So this would not be asking us for a password every time. If I have to exit from the shell, I would type exit and I would come out of this shell. Now if you see, I have already come out of this root user, whereas I'm actually now logged in with the Ubuntu user. So this was about the sudo command that we use on a day-to-day basis. Coming to the next command that we have, we would be discussing about pwd, that also stands for present working directory. We use this command to find the path of your current working directory. All we have to do is enter pwd and it will return the full current path, a path of all the directories that starts with a /. For example, if we are inside /user/username of any user, right, we would be getting an output as that. The syntax for the pwd command is very much simple. We just have to enter pwd and it would give you the required output. There are also some options that are accepted while running the pwd command. One is -l, which also gives you the logical environment variable contents, including the symbolic links. There's also something called as -p, which actually prints the actual path of the current directory. Now let's quickly go ahead and see how this actually works on a real-time basis. So I'm already logged into this server, so if I have to understand which working directory or which folder I'm actually logged into, I have to do pwd, and this would give me the folder path in which I'm currently logged in. A pwd -L would also give me the same output as P. Now this is because there is no physical or logical siblings that are available on this drive. So this folder is pretty much new and we just have this folder. Now if I have to log in, if I have to change it to something, if I do this, so you would see that the command that follows is var log. Now don't be worried of the command that I just entered, which is cd. We would be discussing this command in detail in the next section, that is right after this. So if you see, the present working directory says that I'm actually into var log space. So this is about the pwd command. This is a very useful command because when you log into any Linux server, you are just prompted on this page and you actually don't know which home directory or which folder you're actually logged into. So running a pwd would always give you a clear picture of where exactly you have landed in the Linux system. So this is a very useful command as we speak. The next command that we have is the cd command, which is also called for change directory. Now to navigate through the Linux files and directories, we actually use the cd command quite a lot, depending upon your current directory, that is the current working directory, which we can get from the pwd command in the previous example. It requires the entire full path of the directory name. Now cd is a very useful command used on a day-to-day basis. You would be navigating through all the files and folders using that command on a day-to-day basis. Now running this command without an option will take you to the home folder, that is the home folder of the user that is logged into. We have to keep in mind that only users with sudo privileges can execute this piece of code without a cd, without any options. On the other hand, if we actually have to change directory to a specific location, let's say if we have to go into home users documents, and we want to go into photos. From there, all we have to do is cd photos. Now if we are not in that location but actually in the home folder, we have to give /username /documents/photos, which we would be looking into. And then we finally have some syntaxes. Now if we type cd and a tilde sign, now that tilde sign is on a normal keyboard, it's about the tab symbol or the key next to 1, and we have to press it using the shift tilde. So if we enter that, we would be going into another user's home directory. Now if I don't provide any username, I would be directly going into my user's home directory. If I have to go one directory up, I would be doing cd dot dot. If I want to go to the previous directory, I'll be doing a cd slash. So let's quickly see how these how this can be achieved in the Linux shell. As you guys see, I'm currently in pwd, and this is /home/u/ubuntu. So this is the directory that I'm currently into. Now if I have to go into var log folder, I would just enter cd/var/log, and this will take me to the logs folder. If I do an ls-l, which is listing all the files and folders there, now as you see, the d that you see here is actually meaning that this is a directory. Now if I have to go inside installer, all I have to do is cd installer, and I would be into installers, right? The pwd is also shown over here, so that's var log installer. It's the same present working directory that I'm into. Now if I have to go into private, which is actually in the logs folder, so what I have to do is cd dot dot to go back to the logs folder, and then go into private, which is this. Now if you see, I don't have privileges to go inside this, so what I can do is cd private, and I would be asked for my password, and then I would be allowed into the. So as you see, I don't have privileges to go inside this folder. All I can do is do a sudo su and then go inside this private folder, right? Now if I have to come out, I could always do this and come outside the entire folder. Now if I have to go, this is the present working directory. If I have to go into my home folder of the root user, all I could do is cd tilde, and this would take me to the root folder that I have. Now if I want to go to the root folder of Ubuntu user, all I have to do is cd tilde and the Ubuntu, and type the name Ubuntu, and this will take me to the Ubuntu users home folder. Now if I have to go to the folder back where I was actually there, all I have to do is cd hyphen, and I would be taken into the root folder again, which is where I actually came from. So this is the change directory command, very useful command, wherein we have to navigate through the Linux file system on a day-to-day basis. Now this is very important because Linux servers especially don't have a graphical user interface to navigate through the file system, and this becomes a very critical and important piece to navigate through the system. Now this is exactly how we do the job on a day-to-day basis. So let's start by looking into the first command, that is ls. ls is nothing but for listing the files and the directories in our system. that is running it without a flag or a parameter will show the current working directory contents. That includes the list of files and directories. To see other directories, contents type ls followed by the desired path. For example, if we have to view the files or subfolders that are there inside documents folder, all we have to do is say ls and the actual path of the folder, that would be home username documents, and this would then provide us a list of all the files and subfolders that are there or subdirectories that are there inside the documents folder. Some other options that we can also use with the ls command is ls-r, which would list all the files in the subdirectory. ls-a would show even the hidden files that are available in the directory. That is, any file or any folder that is starting with a dot in Linux is a hidden file or a directory. ls-lh would show the file size in an easily readable format such as MBs, GBs and terabytes. So these are the various options that we have in ls. So the first command that we would be looking into is the ls command. For this I would be logging into my Ubuntu machine. Once that I've logged into the Ubuntu machine, I clear the screen, and the first command that we were looking at is ls. If you see that I have a bunch of files and folders over here, which stands for the ls. Now what I could do is, if I do ls-l, this would give me a list of all the files and folders that is over here. Now over here this would give me a grid view of the entire thing, wherein if I do an ls-l, this would give me a proper list of the files. Now if you see, though we are getting most of the information related to the files, we don't get the size of the file in a readable format. So what we can always do is click on ls-h and we would get the details or the size of the file in human readable format, that in this case is megabytes or MB. So this is all we have. What we can also do is, if I do ls-a, so this would give me a list of all the hidden files also. Now if this is difficult, what we can do is click on ls-la, which would actually give us these hidden files and folders which are available over here. So if you see, Ansible has created a hidden directory inside this home folder, whereas I also have some hidden files named as .profile, .bashrc and other related things with me. So this is the list command that we were discussing. Let's look at the next command. The next command is cat. Cat is nothing but concatenate, or cat is one of the most frequently used Linux commands that you would use on a day-to-day basis. It lists, combines and writes file content to the standard output, that is the terminal. To run the cat command, we typically type cat followed by the file name and its extension. For example, if you have to read a file with file.txt, you would say cat file.txt, and this would give us the content of the file. Now, this is the most important command that you would definitely be using on multiple occasions in your Linux journey. Some other ways in which you can use the cat command is cat, and you could create a file, that is by giving up an arrow and saying filename.txt. This would actually create a file. Cat filename1, filename2 can be sent into filename3. So what would exactly happen is, the content of file 1 and file 2 would be sent into file 3. That is, it merges both file 1 and file 2 and stores the output of that in file 3. What we can also do is, instead of using cat, what I can say is tac, wherein it would display the content in the reverse order. So this is the default commands or the options that we have with cat available for us to our display. Command that we would be looking into is the cat command. So cat command is used to check the content of the file. So let's see what's there in text.txt. I see that we only have one command, one line of the character which says main, and let's also see what's there in the second command, and this is test2. So this is what we have. What I can do is test2, I could send this output to test.txt. So what this would actually do is append the file text.txt. It's not test but text.txt, and what it would do is if I now do a text.txt, this would actually give us both the contents which we have already here. So this is how we can redirect the output of one file into the other file. Now if you see, I would be having a separate file as well, which is test2, but our primary focus was text2.txt. The other thing that we can definitely do over here is play around with the content of the files. If I do a tag, which is for reading the stuff in a reverse order, I could get the exact details in a line by line reverse order. So this would not give us alphanumeric reversal, but it would basically be reading the last line first and the first line last at the top. So that is the tag command for us. Now cat command is very useful if you want to read any system files or any system related stuff, that is any systemd files or any system services. This would be the best command at our disposal to understand the basics of it. If I have to go into the SSD service, which is sshd.service, I definitely would need sudo privileges to read this, so I would go with this, and you would basically be getting the details of the file. So I guess I've given the wrong password, so let's try with punch in the password again and see if I get to read the content of the file. So if you see, this is what the sshd.service file looks like, and this is the content of this file. So cat is very useful to understand what exactly the details are of the file, and this would actually help us a lot. The next command that we would be looking at is copy. To use copy, we use cp command to copy files or directories or their content, and take a look at the following use cases. To copy one of the file from the current directory to another, enter cp followed by the file name and the destination directory. The examples that follow for the cp command are cp, we could give file name and the folder in which we want to copy the file. What we can also do is, if you want to copy multiple files, we could say cp file1, file2, file3 and give the destination where the file has to be copied to. So this would copy all the files into the new directory that we have given. To copy the content of a file to a new file in the same directory, enter cp followed by the source file and the destination file. So if you have to copy the details of the content from file 1 into a new file, that is file 2, all you have to do is cp file1.txt to file2.txt. So this would basically copy all the content from one file to the other. What we can also do is, if you have to copy the entire directory, you can pass a flag by saying R -r flag before typing the source directory followed by the destination directory. So what we could say is cp -R, we could provide the starting directory, the source directory, and we could provide the final directory to where we want it to be copied to. This is generally used for taking backups of the entire folder structure or the file system. The -r is for recursive mode of copying. This would allow us to copy both the files and the folders seamlessly. So now let's look at the copy command. Now copy command is very useful if we have to copy files and folders. If I have to copy text.txt into texting.txt, all I have to do is type cp, the source file and the destination file, and this would now copy the file into a new file for me. What I could do is give cat and do this, and this would probably give me the details of the file. If let's see what is the content of my temp directory over here. So if I say temp, you see that I only have 4 files. Now if you want me to copy texting.txt into the temp folder, all I have to do is type cp, the name of the file, and then the destination folder where I have to copy it, and this should allow me to copy the file over to that location. Now if I look at the content of the file, it would be exactly the same, wherein I would have all the details of the file. Now what we can also do is copy the content, copy the directories itself. Now if you see cpb10 and cpb labs is actually directories that we have. So I could go into cp labs and actually show you the content of the file. So this is a subdirectory structure. Now if I have to copy the entire folder cpb labs from this location into temp, all I have to do is copy this. Now here you would see that I'm getting a permission denied error. That could probably be because I don't have permissions on the cpb lab folder. So what I can definitely do is say sudo cp-r cp labs, and I could say /temp, and this would actually be requesting and changing all the details. And what I can do is do an ls-l for tmp, and I would get my cp labs over here. The next command that we have is move. Move is almost so similar to that of copy, where in the cp command there is the source file is left as it is, wherein in the move command the file is renamed or moved to a different directory. The primary use of the mv command is to move or rename the files and directories. Additionally, it doesn't reproduce or produce any output upon execution. Simply typing move followed by the file name and the destination directory would do the job, wherein we just have to provide the file name and the destination directory wherein we want to move the file. If you have to move or rename the file, we could also give move file 1 and file 2, and that would rename the file from 1 to 2. For example, if you want to move the file name.txt to the documents directory, all you have to give is move, provide the name of the file and the destination directory to which it has to be moved. Now it can also be used to rename the files. All we have to do is move mv, the old file name and the new file name, and this would rename the file that we want. The next command that we would be looking into is the move command. So what we can do is, if I have to rename texting dot something into text.txt in the temp directory, all I can do is click on say move the source file to the destination file, and this would rename the file for me from texting to text. Also, if I have to change the name of the folder from cp labs to cp labs underscore maybe backup back, this would actually change that and give me this folder structure. So this is the move command that we could extensively use if we have to rename the files or move rename a file or a folder. These are the commands that we wanted to discuss in today's session, wherein we have discussed basically four commands, that is list, copy, move, and cat. Along with cat, we have also seen the tac command, wherein this would be giving us the output in a reverse order. This is part 4 of the video, in which we would be discussing 5 basic commands in Linux, which are mkdir, rmdir, rm, touch, and locate. Let's look at the first command. The first command is mkdir. This is used to create a directory in a Linux file system. Using this command, we can either create a single directory or multiple directories at once and set the permissions for each one of them. The users executing this command must have the privileges to make a new folder in the parent directory, or they may receive a permission denied error, which we would try to replicate in the lab section of this video. The syntax is pretty much simple. We just have to enter mkdir command with certain flags or options, and then the name of the directory which we have to create. If you have to create multiple folders in a sequence, you could use something called as mkdir, the first folder and then the second folder itself, and that should give you the basic details. You could use the flag -p, which also means parents, to create a directory between two existing folders. For example, mkdir-p music /2020/songs would actually create the folder 2020 and then songs. We would also be looking into this in the coming video. The next flag that we have in mkdir is -m, that is used to set the permissions that we use during the creation of the directory. Let's now jump into the lab for mkdir. For this, I would be logging into my Ubuntu virtual machine that is running on my local host. In the VirtualBox environment, the command that I'm using is ssh ubuntu @ the IP address, which is in this case the loopback IP. The port at which I am SSHing into the server is 2222. The SSH is working on port 22, but I have a port forwarding enabled on this virtual machine. So once I log into the system, it would ask me for the password because this is a password authentication. Once I'm in, I can clear the screen. So first let's try to see in which folder we are exactly in. So we are currently in the pwd folder. Let's go to the root folder and look at all the folders. I would go into the opt folder, and if you see that there are no folders inside this current directory. Now if I have to make the folder mkdir, and if I say I have to make the folder music inside this, I could just say mkdir music. But then what you would see is we are actually getting a permission denied error, because in the opt folder the permissions that are given are to the root user and the users which are in the root group. So what I can do is do a sudo mkdir music, and this would ask me for the password authentication, and once I give in the password, it will then create the folder for me. What I can also now do is create another folder called as songs over here. So mkdir music songs would actually create the folder songs inside music, but as you see, I don't have the permission, so I'll do a sudo mkdir songs, and this would create the songs folder over here. Now what I can do is I can use the flag -p in order to create music songs what I could do is create songs of 2020 into this folder. And if you see, this has created a separate folder 2022, and this time inside the folder 2022 I would again have the folder songs. So it is leaving the existing songs folder as it is and creating a new folder called as music 2022 and songs. Similarly, we could also set the permissions for this by using the flag -m. So what I could do is, if you look at the songs folder, the current permission set that we have is read, write, execute, which is 7, read, execute, which is 5, and this is 5. What we can do is create a folder mkdir with -m flag 777, and I could call it as dir. Now this is a bad habit that I have, but you always should be running it with a sudo command. This time if you look at the dir folder, you would see that dir is having the execute permissions all through it. So this is how you would create your directory if you want to have some permissions set to it by default. The next command that we are going to discuss is rmdir. This is used to permanently delete an empty directory. We should remember that as we needed sudo permissions or root permissions on the parent directory to create a folder, we should also have those permissions to delete the folder in the directories. Similarly, the thing that we could use is rmdir -p and the directory which we want to delete. I'll quickly go into the lab, and if you see, I'm currently inside the folder music. So what if I wanted to delete the folder songs which is inside 2022? All I would have to do is this, and what this would do is delete the folders, but then I would be given with an error because I don't have sudo privileges with the normal user. So I would have to elevate myself by giving sudo 2020 songs, and you would see that even though 2022 is there, the songs folder inside 22 is now gone, and we are only left with the directory dir in 2022. So this is how you would be deleting existing folders using rmdir command. The next command that we would be using is rm. This command is used to delete files within a directory. We have to make sure that when the user is performing this command, he has the right permissions on that directory. The location in which we are running this rm is very important because this would only remove files which are inside that particular directory. If we have to remove multiple files, we can definitely get rid of them by giving the multiple files in a single list. There are also some options or flags that can be provided. -i would ask for a confirmation if you definitely want to create or delete those files. The second is -f, which is for forcefully deleting the files. So this would not ask for any kind of a confirmation, but go ahead and delete the files from there. -r is used to delete files and the directories recursively. So now let's try to go into the lab section and try to see how this can be achieved. Here, if you see in the 2020 folder, I already have the folder called as dir. I would try to create some files into this folder. By sending the output of the echo into the text file, which is this. Now, since I am not able to do this, so what I'll do is go into the root privileges and then would echo the statement something and send it into 1.txt.
Similarly, what I'll do is send echo ing something else into 2.txt, and you will see that I already have two files, 1.txt and 2.txt. What I can do is now use the copy command to copy 1.txt into 3.txt and so on and so forth. Now if I have to remove files, what I could do is rm-i 1.txt, and this would ask me for a confirmation if I want to delete the file. If I don't want to delete the file, I'll say no, and this would not be deleting the file. Now if I have to go ahead and delete this file, all I have to do is say yes in the confirmation, and this would delete the file. Now if I have to delete both 3.txt and 2.txt at once, what I could say is rm 3.txt and 2.txt. This would do the same thing as yes, yes. If I do this, both the files are now gone. I could do the same echo statement to create the files back. I'm just using the up arrow to create those files, and this should be giving me the files that I want to create. Now if you would see that I already have the files back. Now what I can also do is to delete the files. What I can do is I'll say rm and then say star.txt, and this would delete the files directly. Now the reason why this has not asked me for a confirmation is because I did not give the -i flag. But if I want to delete the files recursively, that is, if I want to delete both the file 2.txt and the directory dir, what I'll say is rm-r dir and 2.txt. This would delete both the directory as well as the file. I could also say rm-rf star, which would delete everything inside the current directory. This is the most common used command in a day-to-day life of an IT engineer, but then this is as critical and important because if I try to delete this from within the folder opt, as you see here, if I run this, I would lose everything which is inside this folder, and this is non-retrievable. So for this reason, we have to be extremely careful when we are dealing with the rm command on a day-to-day basis. The next command that we would be looking into is touch. Touch is used to create empty files in Linux which actually don't have any content in them. The purpose for which we create these empty files is to modify a timestamp using a Linux command line, or to know when the file was generated. For example, I am into this opt directory, and if I have to know what time it is or at what time I created this file, all I would do is touch file.txt, and this would give me the exact timestamp, that is 5th of Jan at 9:02 of the server that I created this file. So this is very important to understand when the files are created. Now you would see that file.txt is an empty file and does not contain anything inside it. So touch is used to create empty files in the file system. The next command that we are discussing is locate. The locate command can find a file in the database system. Moreover, adding the argument -i will turn off the case sensitivity so that you can search for a file even if you don't remember the exact name of the file. To look for content that contains 2 or more words, we can use an asterisk, that is a star symbol. For example, we can say locate -i school star note. What this would do is it will search for files that contains the word school and note, whether they are uppercase or lowercase. I could go for a lab test. Let's try to create a file called as book. I'll say book.txt. What I'll also do is echo something inside this. This is test into book.txt. I would come into the parent folder, which is this, that is slash. Now what I'll do is I can say locate -i book, right, and I could hit the enter, and this would give me a list of all the files that are having book in its name. So this would also include the folders and would also include the files which are having book in its name. Now, as you see, this is a huge list, and we could keep filtering out stuff using this. So this is how we can find the files with the name, exact name in the Linux file system that are added to the Linux database. This would be part 5 of the video series, in which we would be discussing commands like find, grep, df and du. Let's jump into the topic, and the first command that we would be discussing is find. We use the find command to search for files within a specific directory and perform subsequent operations on those files. General syntax for the find command is find. We have some options, the path at which we want to locate the files, and the expression that we need to use to locate the files. For example, if we want to look for a file called its notes.txt within the home directory and its subfolders, what we would do is say find /home -name, and we give the name of the file, which is notes.txt. Other variations of this could be find -name file.txt to find names in the current directory. Also, what we could say is find /type d name directory name to look for directories. Let's look into the lab session to try to understand how exactly this functions. I would be going into my Linux server in my local host, and I am currently in the home directory. I'll be going into the opt folder so that I have some files called as book.txt and file.txt. I will be creating a dummy directory called as dir, and inside this directory I would also be creating files like something.txt. Now if I have to search for the files, now if I am into the home directory, or if I am into the home directory of the root folder, even if I have to find the files like something.txt, what I can do is say find, I could say /opt, because I know that this would be inside the opt folder. I'll give the name as something.txt, and this should give me the actual location of the file. Now if I'm not sure where exactly the I'm not sure exactly where the file could be, I could also do a find / give the name as something.txt, and this would scan the entire file system of the Linux operating system and then provide me with the output that we saw earlier up there. So you would see that we already have the output saying opt directory something.txt. Now this is how we find or search for files in the location. The syntax is find, the directory in which we want to search, and the name of the file that we have to search. Now if you are looking for a directory, in this case if you are looking for the directory named dir, what I could say is find, I could say slash, which is the home directory itself. I could give the type as D, which means a directory, and the name as dir. And if I do this, I would be getting all the directories with the name dir over here. So this is one way in which we could either search the files with the name or folders with the folder name. What I could also do is, even if I don't give the directory or the ending or the extension of the file, I could always use a wildcard, and this would again search for the directory and give it to me. Another basic Linux command on the list of most important commands that we should be learning is grep, which is also called as global regular expression print. It lets you find a word by searching through all the text in a specific file. Once the grep command finds a match, it prints all the lines that contain the specific pattern. This command helps filter through large log files. Some examples of which we can use to find or use the grep is, if you have to search for the word blue in a file called as notepad.txt, this would give us the below output. Let's try to look at the example of this. I am currently in the root folder and I have a file called as test.txt. Now as you see, I already have some numbers. If I have to search for the term this in test.txt, all I can do is grep -i for case insensitivity, the text which I want to find, and then the file in which I want to find the text. This would give me the output of the entire file. Now if I had some additional text, is the number. If I have some additional text, what this grep command will do is print the entire line for us. This way we can find or use the grep command to look for any keyword in the entire file system. This is very important when you are working on application code or infrastructure as code and you are looking for variables, trying to find how many places a particular variable is being called or not. That is the most used example that we use on a day-to-day basis for grep. The next command that we have is df. We use df command to report the system's disk space utilization. This is shown in percentage and kilobytes. The general syntax is df. We can also have some flags like -m, which displays the information in megabytes, -k, which displays the information in kb, -t, which would show the system type of the new column. -t shows the file system type in a new column. We can also have -h, which would show us the details of the file system in a human readable format. Let's look at the lab for this structure as well. The df command works the same irrespective of the directory which we are in, because this would give us a basic overview of the entire file system in the Linux world. If, as you see, all the information that you see over here is in the form of KBs and it's really difficult to be seen. What you can do is add -h, which would give you a basic overview of how the file system looks in a human readable format, that is in megabytes and gigabytes. You could also give a -t, which would give you the type of the file system in a separate column over here. The basic command that we generally use is df-kh, which gives us the details of the system in this format. So this is how we would know the file system utilization on a regular basis, and if the file system is completely used, we would then go ahead and increase the space on the file system. The next command that we have is du. It is used to check how much space a file or a directory takes up in the file system. The command is very similar. We use du. You can run this command to identify which part of the system uses the storage excessively. The syntax looks something like du, that should do the job, or else we could say du and then the location at which we want to look for the utilization. There are some flags or options which we can provide, that is -s offers the total size of the specified folder, -m provides the file information in megabytes, -k displays the information in kb, and -h informs the last modification date of the displayed folders and files. Let's look at the lab, try to see how this can be seen at. I'm currently into the root directory. I'll just go into the / directory, that is the root, and if I have to get a display utilization of everything, what I'll do is say du-sh star, which would give me a basic overview of which file and folders are using the maximum space over here. As you see, /var is 1.1 gigabyte of space, /user is using 2.5 gigabytes, a swap image itself is using 2 GB, and there are many other files and folders which are utilizing some additional space on the server. So this is how we would understand which files and folders are consuming the maximum space. Now if I have to drill down and look and try to understand which part of it is using most of the space, we would see that the backups is using 692 KB, the cache is 101 MB, the log is 262 MB, and so on and so forth. The library folder is using 758 MB. If I have to go inside logs and see which is consuming the max amount of space, I could do a du-sh again, and this would give me a detailed information of which log file is consuming the most space on the server. Now since this is a local machine, I don't have many files which are consuming huge amount of space, but in a production like environment you would have many files which would be consuming lot of space. That's it for this video, guys. In this video we have discussed quite a few Linux commands, starting with find, grep, df and du. Head command allows you to view the first 10 lines of a text file. Now 10 lines is the default that goes in. We can also add the number of lines that we want to view. So we can have an option that lets us change the number of lines that will be shown in the cat command. So head is similar to that of a cat command, whereas a cat would display the entire file, whereas a head would only display by default the first 10 lines of the file. The head command is also used to output pipe data to the terminal. Now the syntax for this is head. We have some options and the name of the file. For instance, if you want to view the first 10 lines of note.txt located in the current directory, we just enter the word head space note.txt. Below are some options that we can add when we are using the head. So as we mentioned, if you want to change the number of lines that you want to see, instead of 10, if you just want to see 5 lines, what I would do is enter head and -n, the number of lines that I want to see and the name of the file. We can also have a flag called as C, which gives us a customized number of bytes of each file. We can also have -q, which so currently I'm logged into my virtual machine that is running on my VirtualBox environment. So let's consider I'm in the directory /home Ubuntu, and this is the current list of files that I see. Let's try to see what's inside texting.txt, and you will see that there are 2 lines that says main and this is test2. So let's try to add some more lines into this. So I'll say line 3, and then let's say line number 10 and 11. Now if I do a cat for texting.txt, I should be getting the changes. Now what has happened over here is while doing the echo statement, what we did is we always send the output to texting.txt. But what we should be doing instead is sending the echoed statement into that. So we should be appending the file instead of sending in the out. How do I change that? How do we change that from happening? So all I have to do is keep adding a new bracket before the file. So what this would now do is keep adding files or keep adding lines into the system. So if you would see that we are now appending multiple lines into this. Now if I have to look at texting.txt from scratch, this is how it would look like. What I can now do is just go in a VI editor, copy this entire thing, come into the insert mode and just enter this multiple times so that I get a lot of stuff. Now if I do a cat on texting.txt, you would see that I already have a lot of lines over here. Now what the syntax for head says is head. If I say texting.txt, this should give me the output of the first 10 lines, which is 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. So these are first 10 lines of the file. Now if I only want to see the top 3 lines of the file texting.txt, this is how we would get the first 3 lines of the file. If you want to see more than 10 lines, you could always specify the number and this would give you the total output of the file. So this is the command head that can be used on various places. The most common place where we would use the head command is when checking the log files. So log files always contains a lot of lines, and in order to view the first 10 or the first 20 lines of a log file, we would use the head command to do so. Let's look at the next command. The next command that we are looking into is tail. The tail command displays the last 10 lines of a file. So head by default displays the first 10 lines of the file. Tail displays the last 10 lines of a file. It allows users to check whether a file has new data or to read error messages. Basic syntax for the tail command is exactly the same as head. We use tail with an option and name of the file. If we have to read a specific number of lines, we could always give -n and then it would give us a list of all the lines. Let's look at the same example. So I'm still in the same directory. I'll do a cat for texting.txt and this is a huge list of lines. what I can do is tail -n. If I just want to see the last two lines, which should be line 47, I will do tail -n, give the number 2 and say texting.txt. So this should display the last two lines of the file. The next command that we would be discussing is diff. Diff is a short for difference. The command diff compares two contents of a file line by line. After analyzing them, it will display the part that do not match. The syntax for diff is very simple. It is diff, we have some options, and then we provide both the files which have to be compared. For example, if you want to compare two files, node.txt and node_update.txt, what I would do is diff node.txt and node_update.txt. There are some additional options that can be added as flags when we are discussing this. -c displays the difference between the two files in a context form. -u displays the output without redundant information. -i makes the difference. Command case sensitive. So let's look at a lab example of how this can be achieved. Again, I have the same file texting.txt. What I'll do is create a copy of this file texting.txt into texting_update.txt, and I'll say diff for texting.txt and texting_update.txt. Because these two files are identical, I should not be able to see any difference being displayed over here. If I go into the texting_update.txt file, and if I keep adding some random stuff on some lines, what would happen is this would now compare the same lines or the same two files and give us a difference of all the files that you see. As you see, we have a major difference in the first and the second line of the file. We have some differences in 16 compared with 16th line. We have some differences in the 13th line, the 9th line, the 5th line, and so on and so forth. So basically what it is saying is this: the first and the second line, when compared to the first and the second line, are different in texting.txt and texting_update.txt. How do I check that? We just discussed head command, so I could use the head command to see what is the first two lines here and what the first two lines are there in the system. So you would see that yes, these two lines are exactly different. If I try to find the head for the first three lines, you would see that the third line over in both the files is exactly the same, which is line number 9. For this reason, we have 1, 2 showing us a difference when compared to 1, 2 on the second file. So this is how you would use the diff command in order to understand what is the difference between multiple files in the system. The next command that we would be discussing is tar. The tar command archives multiple files into a tar file, a common Linux format similar to that of zip, which we generally use in Windows. The basic command for tar is tar. We should be providing some options and the archive file name and the directory which we have to be archived. So the basic command for creating an archive would be tar-cvf, wherein V is for verbose mode, F is the name of the file, that is new archive.tar, and the directory which we have to tar. We can also untar stuff, that is extract all the files by using the flag -x. Let's try to see this example. Let's try to see this with an example in the lab environment. So I'll clear the screen. I have multiple files over here, and if I go into one folder back, that is /home, I have the folder called as Ubuntu. What I can do is say tar cvf ubuntu backup.tar, and I would say Ubuntu, and this should create a tar for me. Now unfortunately I don't have the exact access to do so, because there is one file called as terraform Linux, which is having a root permissions. Also the CP Labs has a root permissions with it. So let me switch over to the root user in this system. I clear the screen. I'm still in the Linux folder, that is Ubuntu. I'll now try to tar the folder saying as Ubuntu user backup.tar and would provide the folder name, that is Ubuntu. Now this would have created a tar file which should be displayed to us in a single minute. Now the tar has completed, so let's try to see if we have a backup. Yes, we have a backup. Let's try to see what is the size of the backup. You would see that the backup size is 541 MB in size. Now what can we do with this backup? Let me go to the temp folder. Here I don't have anything else, so what I'll do is I'll say rm-rf star. So this would actually delete all the files and folders. If you don't know what rm-rf is doing, I will strongly recommend you to look over at part 4 of a video series wherein we discuss rm on a very detailed basis. What I can do is copy the Ubuntu underscore user backup folder from /home directory into the temp directory. This would take a fraction of a second because this is 541 MB in size. If I have to extract the file, what I would be doing is tar xvf, I'll say Ubuntu user backup.tar and hit enter, and this would extract the entire folder into the temp directory. So if I now look at the folder structure, I would have the exact same files and folders which we had in /home Ubuntu in /temp Ubuntu. So this is how we take backups of files and folders on the Linux directory and ship them across to different servers. Individual folders are never copied and pasted over different servers. We always take a backup of it. The backup is in the form of a tar file, and then we ship the tar file to a different location. chmod, chown, jobs and kill. Now these are very important commands that every Linux administrator or the person using Linux should be aware of, because these are what would come into play in critical times. So let's jump into the first command. The first command that we would be looking into is chmod in this video. Chmod is a common command that modifies a file or directory's read, write and execute permissions. In Linux, each file is associated with 3 user classes: owner, group member and others. The syntax that we use for chmod is chmod, we give an option and then the permissions and then the file name. For example, the owner is currently the only one with a full permission on the node.txt, that is read, write, execute permissions. So he can read the file, he can write the file, as well as he can execute that file. To allow a group user and others to read the file, we have to execute the command chmod 777 node.txt, which would change the permissions of the file. There are some other options that can be included while running the same thing. We could say -c, which changes the display information when a change is made. -f is silent, suppresses the error messages if there are any, and -v is for the verbose mode to display a diagnostics of each processed file. Let's look at the lab and try to understand how this can be done. So I'm already into the temp Ubuntu folder. This is the temporary folder that we created, and if you see that texting.txt is having a read, write and read permissions, and the owner of this file is Ubuntu and the group which owns the file is also Ubuntu. If I have to change the permissions of this particular file, what I'll do is chmod. The current permissions that are there on this file is read, write, which means 664 on texting.txt. Now if I run this command, you would see that nothing actually changes in the file permissions of this file, because the permissions that you see over here, that is read write and read, is exactly 664. Now if I have to change this to 775, what would happen is you would get read write execute permissions on this file, and you would also see that the color formatting of the file changes to green, which means that this file can be now executed by the person Ubuntu. So we change the permissions from read write to read write execute, and read execute by saying 755. So this is about the chmod command, wherein you could change the permissions of the files according to the requirement. The next command that we are looking over is chown. Chown command lets you change the ownership of a file, directory, or a symbolic link to a specific username. The basic format that you see over here is chown. We have some options. We give the owner and then the group and then the name of the file. Now if I want to change the permissions for two files, I could give one file after another, which we would see in the next lab section. If, for example, if I want to make Linux user 2 the owner of the file name.txt, what I'll do is I'll say chown Linux user and the file name.txt. Let's look at this same thing in a lab environment. So I'm already there in the temp Ubuntu folder, wherein we already have texting.txt file. The owner of the file is Ubuntu. Now what I can do is with chown, I could change the owner of the file to root for texting.txt. What would now happen is you would see that the owner has changed from Ubuntu to the root user. What I can also do is, if I want to change both the owner as well as the group's permission of a particular file, what I could do is I could give the group details after a colon. So this would change the permissions of texting_update file to root. So here we have changed the owner permissions to root. Here we have changed both the owner as well as the group permissions to root. So this is how we change permissions of files to different users in Linux. The next command that we are going to discuss is jobs. A job is a process that the shell starts. The job command will display all the running processes along with their statuses. Remember that this command will only be available in certain shells, that is CSH, bash, tcsh and ksh. The command for jobs is very simple. You would have already seen that we had something called as a tar, some program, some file name and the directory. Once we provide an ampersand at the end, this would start a job in the directory. So now let's look at the lab for the jobs command. So what we would be doing is, I've already logged into my VirtualBox VM. I clear the screen. I just increase the font a bit, and if you see, if I run the command jobs, I would not see anything, or nothing would be displayed on the screen. What I can definitely do is, if I type sleep for 1000 seconds and give an ampersand at the end, what would happen is this sleep command would then go into the foreground and then be running as the job with the job ID 1221. If I now do jobs, I would be able to see that there is a job ID which is already running, and we would be able to see the status of the jobs that are running. Similarly, I could run a different command like sleep, and I would now be able to see two jobs running with both the process IDs being mentioned. Here earlier in the case, if I just ran jobs, I just saw the status of the jobs, whereas if I do a -l, we would also get the ID of the job or the PID of the job that is actually running. The next command that we would be looking into is kill. We use the kill command to terminate an unresponsive program manually. It will signal misbehaving applications and instruct them to close their processes. To kill a program, you must know its process identification number, or basically called as the PID. If you don't know the PID, we can run the following command to get the PID, that's ps and then ux. After knowing what signals to use and the program PID, we could enter the command kill and then a signal option and then the PID of the number. For example, the program's PID is 63773, and if you want to kill this program or terminate this program running on the system, all I have to do is mention kill -9 63773, or I could also say kill sig kill 63773. This would exactly do the same thing. On a day-to-day basis, we use kill -9 as our go-to command in order to kill any running processes which are unwanted or any processes which are unresponsive but still carrying forward. The following are the most commonly used signals. One is hungs up the process, so 9 is unconditionally terminates the process, and 15 stops a running process gracefully. Now let's go into our previous example. Here, if you see that we still have our jobs running. Now, if I had to get the ID of the jobs that are running, what I'll do is do a ps-ef and then do a grep for sleep, because I know the command that is being run is sleep. So I grep for that, and I would find that these are the two commands which are actually running. So if you see, the PID or the ID that we get when we run jobs is exactly the same ID that we have in the ps-ef command. All I have to do to kill the process is kill -9 and then give the process ID, and this should kill the process ID as we speak. So this is how we can terminate unneeded processes from running in the background, and this way we could get rid of all unwanted processes. If I have to kill multiple processes, for example, if I run sleep, maybe this, and let's say this, and you would see that I would end up having 3 different processes. If I have to kill multiple iterations of a similar process, or if I have to kill multiple process IDs, all I have to do is give all the process IDs with a space, and that should get rid of all process IDs. Now we should be aware that when we do a ps-ef, we also get the actual command that we run, so that's not to be killed because that would have automatically killed by now. Now if I do the same thing, you would see that all the sleep IDs have been killed and nothing is running at the moment. So ps-ef grep-i for sleep would give us nothing at the moment. So this is how we could kill multiple processes that are running on the Linux shell. This is very important to get rid of processes which are unresponsive. Let's look into the first command, which is ping. The ping command is one of the most used basic Linux commands for checking whether a network or a server is reachable or not. In addition, it is used to troubleshoot various connectivity issues that occur on a regular basis. The general format is ping
and the host name or the IP address. For example, we could do a ping google.com, which would tell us if the internet connectivity to google.com is there or not. So let's look at the lab on how this can be done. I'll open a local terminal. I'm on the local system. I'm not SSH'd into any of the Linux machines, but I'm exactly on the Windows server, and I'll say ping google.com, and this should give me a response which would actually be it trying for 4 consecutive times, and this would also tell us the time that it took to get the response from the server. So I can do this again, and this would give me a lower latency this time. So this is how the ping command works. We get basic information of how many packets were sent. In this case, with 4 packets were sent and 4 packets were received, there was a loss of 0 packets, so the percentage loss is 0. The approximate round trip time in milliseconds, so the minimum is 50 milliseconds and the maximum was 130 milliseconds. The average for all the 4 comes out to be 87 milliseconds. So this is basically about the ping command. Now if I want to run the ping command for a consecutive 10 times, so what I can do is I could say ping google.com, and I can give a flag -n and equal to 10. This would make sure that the ping command actually triggers for 10 times, and this would then give us an average of all the 10 moves. The next command that we are looking at is wget. The Linux command line lets you download files from the internet using the wget command. It works in the background without hindering other running processes. The wget command retrieves files using HTTP, HTTPS, and FTP protocols. It can perform recursive downloads, which transfer website parts by following dictionary structures and links, creating a local version of the web page. Also, to use wget, we just have to enter a basic command, that is wget and the URL. For example, we could enter the following command to download the latest version of WordPress on our servers. So basically what I do is do a wget wordpress.org and then say latest.zip. So what it would do is basically download the latest version of WordPress website for us. And you would see that this has connected to the WordPress website. It is waiting for awaiting a response from the site, and once it gets the response, it would then start downloading the stuff. The IP address that you're seeing over here is 192.0.78.9, and this is how we would be getting in packages on our remote server. We will also take another example wherein so basically this is saying that it could not find the stuff. What I could do is if I had to download WordPress download, if I just search for the term WordPress download, and then so this is WordPress 6.11. What I could definitely do is copy the link address, and this should basically give us the command. This would now download the binary into our system. As you see, this did fail for a bit, but then this was able to successfully download the file, and we now have the file latest.zip in our directory, which is this. So this is basically the WordPress site. Similarly, we could also download other applications, like you could say download Terraform or Ansible or any other thing. So what we could do is always go to the main document sites, click on download over here, and then this would take me to the basic sites, and you would see that even the Linux commands, they are using our wget in order to download the entire file or the binary. So this is exactly how everything is happening. So this is about the wget command. The next command that we would be looking at is uname.
uname is a Unix name command, will print detailed information about your Linux system and the hardware. This includes the machine name, operating system, and the kernel details. To run this command, you simply have to enter uname into the CLI. Let's quickly look at an example of how this works. I could say uname, and this would just give me Windows NT 10 as of now. This is happening because this is actually running on my local server or my local laptop. But if I connect to my Ubuntu machine that is running on my local system on the VirtualBox environment, if I go into this and I enter the password, I elevate my privileges, and if I clear the screen and then if I type uname, this should give me the basic details, that is Linux. So this is how this is working. So as you see, so on my local laptop, when I just ran it on my local shell, this gave me actually the actual detail that it gave me was Windows NT 10, whereas when I ran it on the Linux server, it actually gave me the output as Linux. There are also some options that can be printed along with this. So if we type uname -a, we would get a detailed information about the build, the VM name, the host name of the server, and then also the build and the architecture type. Apart from that, if you want to see the kernel information, you could say a -s, which is this, and -n would print you the node's name, which is Ubuntu VM 1. So a -a would give you a detailed list of all the information that is needed. The next command that we are looking at is top. The top command in Linux terminal will display all the running processes and a dynamic real-time view of the current system. It sums up the resource utilization from CPU to memory usage. The top command can also help us identify and terminate a process that may use too many system resources. To run the command, simply type top on the system or the kernel or the CLI. I just say top, and this would give me a detailed description of what amount of memory is occupied, the total amount of memory that is there, and the memory that is free. It will also give me the CPU details of things, also give me a load average of what exactly is happening on the server, and also list down all the services or the processes that are running along with their process IDs. So we'll basically be able to see what all is running on the server at this given moment. In order to come out of the top command, I could just type q and I would be out of the shell. Now the information that you see on the top command is real-time information, and this would keep on changing along with passing time. So as and when any process consumes more of the CPU or the memory, this would always be changing and you would see a lot of other stuff happening. So this is about the top command. The next command that we have is called as history. With history, the system will list up to 500 previously executed commands, allowing you to reuse them without re-entering the entire command. Keep in mind that only users with the sudo privileges can execute this command. How this utility runs also depends on which Linux shell you use. Let's quickly go look at an example. So on this existing server, I have already run a bunch of commands. You would see that I currently have around 305 odd commands that are already run on the system, and this is how we sum everything up. Now you would notice that I am on the root user. Now if I type the history command over here, the user details might change a bit, and you would see that we are not able to see all 305 commands, but we are only able to see 169 odd commands that are run. This is because this is only showing the commands that were run by the Ubuntu user, whereas when I ran it with the root user, it showed me along with the Ubuntu user as well as the root user's outputs. So that is the difference that is being seen over here. So this is about history command. So always you can always get into this, and you could always see what was actually run and go for the history, and you will get the output. So this is exactly how stuff is done on a regular basis. The first command that we are going to discuss in this video is man. The man command provides a user's manual for any command or utilities you can run in the terminal, including the name, description, and options. This consists of 9 sections exactly. First is executable program or shell commands. The second is system calls. The third being library calls. The fourth being games. The fifth being files, special files. Sixth being file formats and conventions. Number 7 is system administration commands. Number 8 is kernel routines, and number 9 is miscellaneous. To display the complete manual, all you have to do is say man and the name of the command for which you would like to see the manual. Let's look at the example of this. I'll say man ls, and you would get the exact details of the entire man command over here. So this is the first part of it. This is the name. It gives us a synopsis, then gives us a detailed description of all the flags that are possible in the ls command. After a detailed description of all the flags and the options that are available, we would then go look at the author and then reporting bugs, copyrights, and then we also get other informations like this. If you have to come out of this terminal, you have to type in q and you would be out of the terminal. Similarly, what we can also do is maybe do a man for the tar command, and here you would see that we have a detailed description of all the possible entries that you would get. There's a lot of documentation that you could follow through and get the details. Now if for any reason you find it difficult to read the man on the Linux terminal, what you could always do is open your browser and click on man tar, and you would get the exact details that you saw on the Linux terminal on the browser window. So this is one way in which you could do a copy paste or a control F, or even you could tag the resources. So this would be a very useful command if you are looking for options to play around with. The next command that we would be looking into is echo. The echo command is a built-in utility that displays a line of text or string using the standard output. Here's the basic syntax. It's very simple. You just have to say echo. We have some options, but then you have to provide the string. Now the string that we provide inside the double inverted commas would actually be displayed as an output. So for example, if we have to display something like hosting a tutorial, so we would give an echo and that would come out as it is. The option that we would be using is -n, that displays the output without trailing new line. -e enables the interpretation of the following backslashes escapes. /a plays an alert sound. /b removes spaces in between the text. -c produces no further output, and uppercase E displays the default options and disables the interpretation of the backslash escapes. Let's look at the examples. I could say echo cloud patashala, and this would be exactly what is displayed. The next command that we would be looking into is zip and unzip. Use the zip command to compress your file into a zip file, a universal format that is commonly used on Linux as well as Windows. It can automatically choose the best compression ratio. The zip command is also useful for achieving files, archiving files and directories, and reducing the disk usage on the system. All you have to do is say zip and then give a list of all the files that you would like to zip and compress into one single file. So this is something like, for example, if you have a file name note.txt and you want to compress that into archive.zip, all you have to do is provide zip, the new file name or the zip file, that is archive.zip, and then you give the actual file that has to be zipped, that is note.txt. Let's look an example for this. So I'm currently in the current working directory, and you would see that I do have few stuff over here. So what I will say is zip backup.zip, and I would give as texting.txt and texting underscore update.txt in the system. Now you would see that this is actually complaining that the zip utility is not available on my system. So what I'll be doing is would be installing zip on my system using the apt package controller. I would say yes, and this should now download the package on my system. I'll run the same command, so that is zip blah 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 dot blah blah blah, and this would give me the backup file called as backup.zip. So basically, let's try to move this backup.zip into the temp folder, and once I move this into the temp folder, let's go into the temp folder, that is /tmp, and then let's try to see if by unzipping the file and see how it works. Now to unzip a file, what we have to do is just say unzip and the name of the file, and this would actually extract all the files. So I'll say unzip backup.zip, and you would see that I now have both the backup file as well as the texting.txt and texting underscore update.txt files in my file system. Now both zip and unzip is hugely used when we have to ship files and folders from one system to another system. So this is heavily used along with the tar command. So both tar and zip and unzip are heavily used in order to move files from one file system or one server to the other server. The next command that we are looking into is hostname. So we run the hostname command to know the system's hostname. You can execute it with or without any options, and the general syntax follows as hostname, and you will get the output. If you want to use any flags, the possible flags that we have is -a. It will display the alias of the hostname. -uppercase A would display the full FQDN of the server, and -i would display the IP address of the server along with it. Let's look at an example. I'll clear the screen. So just hostname would actually display the name of the server or the hostname, that is ubuntu-vm-1, whereas hostname-i would display the IP address of the server. As we know, this is actually giving us the IP address or the loopback IP address of the server, that is 127.0.1.1.
We are in part 10 of the series, and we would be uncovering the commands like useradd, apt-get,
su userdel alias. The first command that we would be looking into today is useradd. Linux, as you know, is a multi-user system, meaning more than one person can use it simultaneously. Useradd is used to create a new account, while passwd command allows you to add a password to the user. Only those with root privileges or sudo can run the useradd command on the Linux shell. When you use the useradd command, it performs some major changes. It edits /etc passwd file, /etc /shadow, /etc /group, and /etc gs shadow files for the newly created accounts. It also creates and populates a home directory for the user, sets file permissions and ownership to the home directories that is provided to the user. The basic syntax is useradd. We have some options and then we provide the username. For example, to add a new person named John, we enter the following thing like useradd John, passwd John, and then the password for the user. In Ubuntu, the home directory for the new user is not created by default when you use the useradd command to create the user. To create a home directory for the new user, you can add the flag -m to the useradd command to get it created. Useradd -m new user. If you want to specify a different home directory for the new user, you can use the flag -d with -m to specify a particular home directory for the user. Let's look at the practical on how this can be achieved. For this, I would go into the terminal of my laptop. I would SSH into my Ubuntu server. Now that I am logged into the Ubuntu user, I'll clear the screen, and what I'll do is say useradd and provide the name Cloud Pathshala. Here, as you see, we are getting the error saying that we don't have permissions to do so. So what I'll be doing is switching into the root mode, and here we can say useradd Cloud Pathshala, and this would add the user. A passwd command for Cloud Pathshala can be used. This will now ask me to set the password, and I can set the password for this. Now that the user has been created, I can SSH into the server with the new username, and this would allow me the prompt to log into the server. Now that I'm logged into the server, you would see that I am not logged into a specific path because we did not provide the flag -m. Now let's quickly try to see how we can add a new user and then log in with the new user to see if the home directory is added. What I'll do is provide the flag -m and I'll say cloud user as the new username. The passwd would be for cloud user. It will ask me to provide a password for this user, and now that the username has been created, what I can do is SSH to the server with the new username, and this would allow us to log into the server. And this time, if I go into the home directory, you would see that this time, if I log into the home directory, you would see that the home directory for cloud user has been created. Whereas in the earlier example where we used Cloud Pathshala as the username, the home directory was not created for this user. So this is how useradd command can be used to create a user in the shell or the Linux file or the Linux server. The next command that we would be looking into is called userdel. To delete a user account in the Linux server, we can use the command userdel. It's very straightforward. We just have to provide userdel and the username and we have to provide the username which has to be deleted. I'll go into the original shell. This is where we have our two users created. What I'll do is say user del and then would terminate or delete the first user account that we created. So as you see, because we are already logged into the shell with the current username, it is actually saying that the user cloud part shell is currently used by the process 1245. Now what is that process? That process is actually the SSH shell. What I can do is clear both our shells and try to run this after some time, or else I could use one of our previous examples, ps-ef. I can do a grep for 1245 and this would actually has to show some output. Now because this has not shown us any other process that is running, so that means that the shell has been terminated on the process level as well, and now I can delete the user. Now that the user is deleted, what I can do is try to log in to the shell with the same user, and irrespective of any number of times I provide the right password, this would not allow me to log in to the shell because the username has been deleted. Now similarly, we can try to delete the other user, that is cloud user, and this would also terminate the user. So this is how we can get out of the users or delete the users in Ubuntu server. The next command that we would be looking into is apt-get. apt-get is a command line tool for handling advanced package tool apt libraries in Linux. It lets you retrieve information and bundles from authenticated sources to manage, update, remove and install software and its dependencies. Running the apt command requires you to use sudo or root privileges on the server. The syntax is very similar. It is apt-get update, apt-get upgrade and apt-get check updates. Let's look at a practical example of how apt works on an Ubuntu server. For this, I'd be going back to my shell, which is this. I'm already into the root user, so what I can do is say apt update, and this would actually update the repositories from the remote location. So it would just update all the package information on the local server with the latest information. Once this is completed, we could say apt upgrade, and this would initiate the upgrade process for all the processes that we have. I could say apt-get upgrade, and this would initiate the upgradation process. It will ask me for a confirmation if I want to upgrade the stuff, and if I say yes, so this would then start downloading and installing the stuff as you see on the screen. So all the Linux updates, kernels and all of those things are being updated as we speak. And once the installation is done, this would give you a brief overview of what all has been installed and what all packages were updated. So as you saw earlier, it was downloading the information. Now it is packaging, installing and unpacking all the binaries that it has downloaded from the apt repositories. So as you see, the update has completed and we have the latest packages installed on the server now. The next command that we would be looking into is called as alias. Alias allows you to create a shortcut with the same functionality as the command, file, name or the text file. When executed, it instructs the shell to replace one string with another. To use alias command, you just have to enter the following syntax: alias, the name that you want to give it, and the string which you want to assign it with. For example, if I want to give an alias for the kill command, I could say alias k is equal to kill, and this would give the details. Let's look at an example. Also, we would be looking into how we can unset it, but first let's try to see how this works. I will take Terraform as an example. So I have Terraform -- version. This gives me a version of Terraform version 1.3.7. Now what I can do is set up an alias saying that tf should be equal to Terraform. Once I do this, and if I run Terraform -- version now, this would give me the same exact output as Terraform -- version. Now, for obvious reasons, TF is much shorter than running Terraform totally. So this would be a great help when you are doing your day-to-day jobs. To unset the alias, all we have to do is say unalias, and I would say tf, and this would run the unalias for me. Now if I try to do tf - version, this would say that tf, the command, was not found, and the Terraform would still work as it is. So if you see, I could give Terraform -- version as the entire thing. I could set the value to tvf, and if I just run tfv, this would give me the exact output that we used to get in tf - version. So what we can do is we can set the entire string or entire command into one smaller variable, and we can use that to run the commands going forward. So this is how we can do our own stuff with aliases. So we could create our own commands with alias running in the background. The next command that we would be looking into is su. Switch user or su command allows you to run a program as a different user. It changes the administrative account in the current login session. This command is especially beneficial for accessing the system through SSH or using the GUI display manager when the root user is unavailable. General syntax is su and the username that you want to switch. Let's look at the example for this. Very simple. As you see, I'm currently into the root user. Now if I had to switch or create a user called as useradd, if I say -m cloud user 2, so if you see, I've created a user cloud user 2, and I would also set the password for this. This is passwd for cloud user 2. I would give the password. Now there was a typo when I was giving the password, so I'll give the password again. Now that the password has been successful, I could say su to cloud user 2, and this would take me to the cloud user account. Now whatever I create or run in this shell would be with the cloud user account. Now if I have to exit this user, I just have to say exit, and this would take me out of the user's shell. So this is the normal root account. Now if you remember, in the earlier video I did a sudo space su command that took me to the root user from the Ubuntu user. So I would again hit exit, and this would take me out of the root user. As you see, I am currently logged in with the Ubuntu user at the moment. We are in part 11 of the series, wherein we would be discussing various commands like htop, wc, ps, and uptime. The first command that we would be discussing is htop. The htop command is an interactive program that monitors system resources and server processes in real time. It is available in most Linux distributions and can be installed using different package managers. Compared to the top command, htop has many improvements and additional features such as mouse operations and visual indicators. To use it, run the following commands. You could say htop. We could also use some options Options are -d shows the delay between the updates in 10th of a second. -C would give you a no color monochromatic view of the output. -h would display the help message and exit. Let's look at the practical for this. For this, I would be going into my Ubuntu server that's running on my virtual machine. I'll say htop, and this would give you a better visually helpful way of looking at the stuff. So if you see, my CPU is just hovering around 1 to 1.5%. The memory is bit consumed. We have consumed about 165 megabytes of memory out of 1.9, that is 2 GB allocated to it. The swap is also very less, and we also have a list of IDs that you already have. And with the mouse, I could also figure out and point out the resources, and I could also get into individual things like this. So I could also go into filters using the function F4 commands and stuff like that, and this would take me to a lot of other things. When compared to the top command, the top command gives you a very holistic picture of an old school way of showing you the resource utilization. This also shows the exact same things, but htop command would give you a very pictorial representation of how this can be seen on a very good manner. So you could also select memory, and this would actually give you a list of all the filters using the memory which is using most of the memory. You could also filter using which is using most of the CPU. Similarly, you could just filter out using the process IDs or the user who is executing it and stuff like that. You could also filter out services which are running from the very beginning. So as you see, the root, the process ID 1, which is the first process ID which is actually started when a Linux server comes up, is the one which is running for the most amount of time. So this is about the htop command. The next command that we would be looking into is ps. Now we already saw some action of ps command in the previous video. If you're not checked that out, I would strongly recommend you to go and check the previous video wherein we actually used the ps command, though we could not get any output out of it. So the process status or ps command produces a snapshot of all the running processes in your system. The static results are taken from a virtual file in the /proc file system. Executing the ps command without an option or argument will list the running processes in the shell along with the PID, the TTY, that is the type of terminal, and the running time, and the command which was used to launch the process. Some of the acceptable options that can be used is -t, -u, and -a. We obviously would be using some other flags. So let's quickly jump into this, and I'll clear the screen. I'll just run ps, and this would give me the basic options that I have. So these are the two shells that are actually running at the time of recording. If I say ps-ef, so this would give me a very elaborate list of all the things that are running. So as you see, this is the user which was used to run it. This is the PID that was used to run it. That is the time from which it has been up, and the system command or the actual command line that was used to run the process. So a very small example would be if I say sleep for 1000 seconds and give you an ampersand, and if I do a ps-ef this time, you would see that my sleep command is running with the process ID 49954, and as you see, this is the exact same PID that we got when we ran this with ampersand. Now if you're not aware of what ampersand is doing over here, strongly recommend you to watch one of our older videos wherein we discuss jobs in Linux which is using the ampersand sign to run this command in the background. So this is about the ps command, very useful in getting the services. And once we get the process ID from the ps command, we could use the kill-9 command that we have also discussed earlier to kill the process. And if you see, now we would not be having a ps-ef with the sleep command. So this has already killed the command. So this is where ps-ef is extensively used on a day-to-day basis for all Linux administrators to see which processes are running on the server. The next command that we would be looking into is wc. Now wc stands for word count. Command line in Linux is used to display the number of lines, words and characters in a file or input from a pipeline. In simple words, command line tool that can be used to quickly get the information about the size of the file or the number of words in a text file. Examples are, if you want to get the number of characters that are there, number of lines, words and characters, so wc and the file name would give you a list of all the things. wc-l would give you a list of all the lines that are there. wc-w would give you a list of all the words that are there in the file. If you want to count the number of characters in a file, you could use the flag -m, and if you want to get a number of lines from multiple files, you could say wc-l and then a list of all the files that we have. So let's quickly look at the practical example of how this can be checked. So if you see, I have some files tst, and if you see that I have a file called as texting.txt, and this has some lines that are attached to this. What I can do is say wc-l and then give the name of the file, which would give me the number of lines that are there on the file. If I just say wc and then the name of the file, this would give me the number of lines that are there on the file, the number of words that are there on the file, and the number of characters that are there in this file. So this is how you would use wc-l. I could say wc-m and this file name, and this would give me a list of all the characters that are there on the file. If I want to get a list of all the words that are there on the file, I would say wc-w, and this would give me number of words that are there on this file. So this is about word count, a very useful tool to understand if you have downloaded or got all the list of entries that when you are copying it from one server to the another, and many others like this. The next command that we would be looking into is uptime. It is used to find out how long the system is active, running. This command returns set of values that involve the current time and the amount of time system is in the running state, the number of users currently logged in, and the load time from the past 1, 5 and 15 minutes respectively. The options include -p, which would give you a pretty output or a formatted output of this. -h would give you the help display output. -s would give you time up since the system was up, and -v would give you the version of it. I'll quickly type the command uptime to see what outputs we are getting on this system. So if you see, the uptime is about 42 minutes. The local time on the server is 7:51:24, that is 7 hours 51 minutes 24 seconds. The number of users that are logged into this server is 1, and the load average for this is 0.02 for the last 5 minutes, and for the last 15 minutes it is 0.10. So that means the load average is very minimal, because I'm not performing any other operations on the server and just using it for the purpose of the tutorials. So this is the uptime command. This would give you a very detailed understanding of how much time the system has been up by using this parameter. The etc hosts file in Linux. The /etc/hosts file is a local static file that maps host names to the IP addresses in the system. It is used by the operating system as the first source of hostname to IP address mapping before trying to query to the DNS server. Each line in the etc hosts file consists of an IP address followed by one or more host names. separated by spaces. Like for example, we could say 127.0.0.1 would point to localhost, 192.168.1.100 would point to example.com. In this example that we see above, right, so localhost is mapped to the IP address 127.0.0.1, whereas example.com is mapped to IP address 192.168.1.100. The /etc/hosts file can be used for a variety of purposes, such as overriding the DNS resolution for specific host names, blocking access to malicious websites or ad networks, speed up the access to frequently used websites by mapping their host names to IP addresses. This would eliminate the amount of time it takes to query the DNS, testing network configurations and applications on a larger scale. By adding or modifying the entries in the /etc/host file, you can control how the system resolves host names and which IP addresses it uses for specific host names. However, we have to keep in mind that changes to the /etc/host file only affects the local system and will not be propagated to other systems in the network or across the network. Let's look at a practical demo to understand the /etc/host file in deeper sense. For this, I would be going into my AWS account. So I have already created an EC2 instance for this purpose. I would copy the public IP and then go into my terminal, change into the directory where the key is present, and then go ahead and connect to the server. I could use the SSH client and I would get the exact SSH command that I have to run in order to get to the server. Now that this has been added, so we are currently inside the server. Now I would change my privileges to root, and then what I could do is do a cat for etc hosts file, and you would see that the current entry that I see is 127.0.0.1 is pointing to localhost, localhost.local domain, localhost 4, localhost 4.local domain 4. The second entry that we see is for the IPv6. Though we are not using the IPv6 address spaces, we still have a local entry that is available for the IPv6 address spaces. Now, in order to test this, right, let's try to host a web server on our EC2 instance and then try to understand how we could play around with this setup. I'll do an installation for HTTPD service. So I'll do this, and this should install the service for us. Now that the service has been installed, I would quickly restart the service so that we have a system running. I would then vi into var www.html index.html and say this is testing the DNS via /etc/hosts file, and I would put this. So what happens now is I could do a clear screen, right? And if I do a curl curl for localhost, I would get the following output. Now the reason why we did not have the actual file that we created come as a default website is because the name that we have provided for HTML is wrong. So what I'll do is move this file into var www.html, it's index.html. Now if I try to do a curl for this, I should get the following output. Now if you remember the etc hosts file, so we also can use localhost 4 as our domain name, and this would also give us the same output that we got with localhost. And this is also true if you want to use it via the localhost.local domain, and this is also going to give you the same output that you see. Now, let's try to create our own example.com. So what I'll do is go into the etc hosts file, and I would put in my own entry asking for a change in this. So what I'll do is for 127.0.0.0.1, what I do is I would say demo.cloudpathshala.in, and I would save the file. Now that the file is saved, let's see if this works for us. All I now have to do is clear the screen, do a curl for this entry, and see if I am getting the domain or not. So this is how we can test multiple things, or this is how we could modify the DNS on the local system and try to access the same stuff. What I could also do is have a parallel entry for saying demo.cp.in, which would also mean that demo.cp.in should also be then moving into this own system. So this is how we could map multiple addresses, or we could map things on our end. What we can also do is create a different EC2 instance which would not have HTTPD service, that is Apache is not installed on it, but we would be using this server to access the site which is hosted on the second server. For this, I would have to whitelist the server's security group, that is the demo server security group in the Linux, so that the firewall allows seamless access to it. So what I'll be doing is quickly going into the inbound, and I'll be saying HTTP should be allowed on this. Now, if you're not aware of what these firewall rules are doing, I strongly recommend you to check the AWS playlist that we have in our channel, which would give you a fair understanding of what the security group rules are doing. So I'll open a new tab, cd into the stuff, and then SSH into the server. Now that I have already gone into the server, so what I could do is I could elevate my privileges. If I do a curl localhost, I would not find anything because there is nothing running on the server at the moment on localhost. Now if I do a cat for this etc/host, you would find that there are only 2 entries that are pointing to this. Now what I could do is I would provide the details of my web server, which is the first one that we created. I'd give the private IP address as one of the, I'm already in the insert mode, I'll paste the IP address and give a space and then say demo.cp.in. I could also say demo.cloudpathshala.in, and this should be working. Now what I could do is curl demo.cp.in, and this should give me, there was a typo, so let's give it a proper name. So once I do this, you would find that even though I don't have the website running on my server, which is on IP 172.31.1.12, I'm still able to access this. Now I am not using any DNS service as of now from Route 53 or any other provider, and by only adding the details of IP address and the domain in the /etc/host file, I was able to access the website from a different server. Now it's obvious that we cannot be doing this on every server that is available. For this specific reason, we would only be using /etc/host file when it comes to troubleshooting specific issues related to connectivity and other related things. A DNS would be propagated to all the servers in the domain or in the network, but then /etc/host files is only and only specific to a particular server. How can I prove that? So what we can do is go into etc/hosts and we could remove the last entry that we just created. Now that the entry has been deleted, if I try to do the curl for the same URL, this should not be working because the system first tried to check if the entry was existing in the /etc/host file. If it does not find the entry in that, it would try to do a DNS query, and if there is no DNS entry related to this application or this domain, it would then give us a error saying that it could not resolve the host name. I hope this brings much more clarity into what /etc/host files are. In the next video, we would be looking at what /etc/resolv.conf is doing in the server. So these two are very closely related to each other and work hand in hand for all the DNS resolutions and queries that happen on a Linux server. Today in this video, we would be doing a deep dive into what is /etc/resolv.conf in our Linux file systems. The /etc/resolv.conf file is a configuration file on the Linux or Unix-like operating system that specifies how the system should resolve host names to IP addresses. It is used by the domain name system DNS resolver, which is the component of the operating system responsible for converting host names such as www.google.com into an IP address such as 172.217.3.174. The /etc/resolv.conf file contains information about one or more DNS servers that the system should use to resolve the host names. This information is usually provided by the network administrator or automatically configured by the network manager of the operating system. Each line in the /etc/resolv.conf file specifies a different DNS server. The most common line in the file is name server, which is followed by the IP address of a DNS server. For example, name server space 8.8.8 would represent the Google's DNS server, which is located at IP address 8.8.8 as the name server. The /etc/resolv.conf file is read every time the system needs to resolve a host name. So changes to the file takes effect immediately. If there are multiple DNS servers specified in the file, the system will use them in the order they are listed. If the first server fails to respond, the system will try the next server in the list and so on. You can add a manual entry in the /etc/resolv.conf to specify a custom DNS server or to override the default DNS server. To add a manual entry, you need to have a root access to the system. In order to do that, you need to open the /etc/resolv.conf file with a text editor such as nano or vi and add a new line with the name server directive followed by the IP address of the DNS server you want to use. Syntax is similar to what we already saw in the example earlier, which would be name server space and the IP address of the DNS server. Let's look at a practical demo on how we can look at the /etc/resolv.conf in a detailed manner. For this, I would SSH into my local server or the local VM Now that I've logged into the VM, I would elevate my privileges. Once I have elevated the privileges, let's do a cat for etc resolv.conf to see what are options that we have. You would see that name server is pointing to the IP address 127.0.0.53. Now this is one of the IP servers which is available on the internet. We could check that by doing a ping to this server of this IP address, and we would get the following output. Now what we can do is use the dig command to see if google.com is resolvable from that IP address or not. So the dig command would give you the following output, wherein we are getting the DNS value for google.com as 142.250.196.46. If you see, the query took 35 milliseconds and the server which gave the output was 127.0.0.53, which is the public DNS server that we had by default. What we can also do is add a manual entry into the resolv.conf, wherein I would comment the existing line and then I would add a new line for the DNS server saying 8.8.8. I'll save the changes. I'll do a cat for the etc resolv.conf to see if the changes have been effective or not. And now if I clear the screen and do a dig for google.com, I would get the following output. Here you see that for google.com I'm getting the IP address 142.250.195.238, and this time the query took 75 milliseconds and the server from which the DNS resolution was queried is 8.8.8.8. I could change the name server back to 127.0.0.53, and if I do a dig, you would find that I'm getting a different IP address, that is 142.250.196.46, and this is pointing to this is being queried from the server 127.0.0.53. So as you see, both these servers have a different IP address associated for google.com, and the good thing is both the IP addresses are valid. So you see that the curl for HTTP 142.250.195.238 is giving us the 301 page move to www.google.com. If I do the same curl for the other IP address, which is the one ending with 46, I should be getting a similar output from this as well. There was a typo in the protocol that we were using, so this is HTTP, and you would see both the IP addresses are giving us a similar output, that is www.google.com, and the page is being moved to this thing. So this is about /etc/resolv.conf in detail. Now let's take a very quick example of the etc resolv.conf in a cloud-based server, wherein I would go into my cloud instance which is there on the internet. I would SSH into the server. Now once I SSH into this server, I would elevate my privileges and this time clear the screen, do a cat for etc resolv.conf. You would see that the IP address this time is a different IP address. Now this IP address is 10.14.0.0. Now this IP address is not a public IP address but a private IP address. Now this IP address is actually coming from the subnet, and this is the IP which is responsible for giving us the DNS queries on our AWS subnet. To understand more about it, you could refer to the subnet documentation in the AWS and you would find that. So as you see in the documentation, it clearly says that the third
IP address in the VPC is always reserved for the DNS server. AWS by default reserves 5 IP addresses, of which the first IP address is the network address, the second is reserved for the VPC router, the third one is reserved by AWS, which is the IP address that I see on the screen. If I do a dig for google.com, I would be getting this output, and if you see, this output is totally different from the output that we were getting earlier from the query that we did on our local server or the local VM that we have on our virtual box. Now, as you see, we have many other options that are available in the /etc/resolv.conf, they being search, options, and name server. So let's try to understand what these options are in a brief manner. So as you have seen, in addition to the name server directive, the /etc/resolv.conf file may also contain other directives that provide additional information about the DNS resolution process, they being domain, which specifies the default domain name to use for the host name resolution. For example, if the domain name is example.com and you try to resolve the host name demo, the system will try to resolve the thing as demo.example.com. Similarly, search specifies the list of domains to use for the hostname resolution separated by spaces. The system will try to resolve host names using each of the domain in the list until it finds a quick match. Whereas options specifies various options for the DNS resolver, such as the maximum number of retries that it has to do, the timeout value, or the method of resolving the host names. Also, there is something called a sort list, which specifies the list of IP address ranges and their associated subnets used to control the order in which the DNS resolver tries to resolve host names. Ultimately, we have name server, which we already have been looking into. Now, this is a typical example resolv.conf, which is something similar to what we already see in the resolv.conf configuration on EC2 instance. Here search means it is going to search for anything .ap-south1.compute.internal. The options say that the timeout value should at least be 1 second and the number of attempts that it has to take or do before it fails is 5. Let's jump into the first command, ifconfig. The ifconfig command is a Linux command used to configure and display information about the network interfaces. It's a command line tool that can view network interface statuses, configure IP addresses, and change the network settings if needed. In order to display the information of the network interfaces, or you could just type in ifconfig. To display information about a specific network interface or network interface card, you could mention the network interface card ID, that is network interface ID, ifconfig. In this example, it is Ethernet 0. If you want to bring a network interface card up or down, you could use ifconfig Ethernet up, ifconfig Ethernet down. The ifconfig command is being phased out in most of the Linux distributions as of recording of this video. It's been replaced by the IP command, which provides more advanced features and it's considered more powerful than the ifconfig command. But you would see all legacy system administrators falling back to ifconfig by default for getting the network interface or the IP address details of a particular server. It's important to note
that you may need to run these commands with super user permission, so you can prefix the command with a sudo or run the commands as the root user itself. Also, the output of the if command may vary depending upon the version of the operating system that you are running. So that is, it is different for operating system flavors like Ubuntu, Red Hat, and so on and so forth. Let's look at a practical demo on how this can be played around with. For this, I would be logging into my VirtualBox environment. So this is actually an Ubuntu server which is hosted in my VirtualBox environment. Now that I've logged into the system, what I could say is say ifconfig, and this would give me the details of the network interface card that I have. Now, because this is a VirtualBox VM, I only have one Ethernet adapter or the network adapter attached to this system or this server. I could go to the settings of this, and you would see that in the networks I only have one adapter assigned at the moment. Now, if you want to assign a different adapter, you could definitely do it, but for that we would have to power on the VM and then play around with the adapter. So let me quickly shut down the VM. I'll just power off the VM. There's nothing much to be saved on the VM, so I'll just do that. I'll go into network, and adapter 2 is now enabled, so I would do it as adapter 2, and this adapter I would keep it as a bridge adapter, no harm there, and then again power on the virtual machine. So you would now see that this is the console that is coming up. I would still be able to log in with my VirtualBox environment going forward. I could just double click on this shortcut that I've created, and this would take me to a login prompt where it would ask me for my password for the Ubuntu user on that particular server. Provided the password, I've logged into the system. I'll clear the screen and I'll say ifconfig, and you would see that I only am seeing the default network adapter that we earlier had. But if I do an ifconfig a, it will then show me the new network adapter that has been added, that is ENP, that is 0S3. So this is the new network adapter that has been added. Now what I could do is I could say ifconfig the adapter and then say up. As I'm not the super user, I would not be able to do that, so I would do with this super user, and you would now see that if I do an ifconfig on this, the second network adapter is also enabled, as we see. Now if I have to disable the second network or the newer one, or what I could just say is ifconfig the Ethernet card, and I'll say down, and this would disable the network adapter like we already had. So this is how you could play around with the network adapters or the ifconfig command to configure, enable, disable your network adapters as you wish. Now there is a lot of information that comes along with the ifconfig command, so let's try to understand what they are. You would find that the network adapter or the NIC card would be allocated an IP address. So ifconfig is generally and ideally used for getting the IP information of the server to know what the IP address for that particular network adapter is. So for this instance, we get a network IP of 10.0.2.15. The subnet mask and the broadcast IP is also allocated. If you are using IPv6, you would also be getting an IPv6 the IP address allocated to you. There is a lot more other information related to the packet sizes and all other information that is there. In an ifconfig command, we primarily would be looking at what the IP address that network interface card. Like we saw, ifconfig is being disabled or deprecated very soon, and this would be replaced with IP. Now if you type IP, it would not be giving you the basic objects, but what we can do is use the flags that are available on our screen to see what we can gather from it. If I say IP and then say address, so you would see that I am getting the same IP at the same list, but this time I'm also getting the third network interface card that is attached to this server but not enabled at the moment. And you would clearly see that the FQ code else state is down at the moment. If I bring it up, this would then be giving us an IP address and all other things as usual. This is how network administrators and Linux admins identify the IP address of a particular server if they are logging in through a console. This is very important, wherein you would be able to bring the server up or bring the server down in a network. The next command that we would be looking into is netstat. The netstat command in Linux is used to display network connections, routing tables, and variety of network interface and network protocol statistics for us. It is useful command for troubleshooting network related issues and monitoring network activities. Some example of the netstat command are netstat, you could say a -tuln, which would display all the active connections that are there in the system. If you want to display all the listening ports that are there on the server, you could say netstat -l t and n, and you would get the list of all the listening ports that are there. To display all the open connections to a specific port, what you could say is netstat -a tn, then you could do a grep on that particular port number, which would give you the details of all the connections that are open on that particular port. To display all the established connections, you could utilize the grep command to search for established, and that would give you a very quick overview. If you want to see all the statistics of all the protocols, all you have to say is netstat -s, and this would give you a detailed statistical report of all the things that are there. To display the routing tables on the operating system itself, you could say netstat -r. If you want to check the network interfaces and their statistics, you could say netstat -i. If you want to display all the multicast group memberships, you could say netstat -g. The netstat command, as you see in the previous slides, have many options, and you can use them to display different type of information and statistics. For example, -t to display the TCP connections, -u to display the UDP connections, -l to display the listening ports, and -n to display the numerical addresses instead of host names. Let's look at a very quick demo on how network administrators use netstat command on a daily basis. For this, I would be going back to my Linux prompt. I would be clearing the screen and I would just say netstat, and this would give me a very holistic view of what is happening on the server at the moment. But if I want to see all active connections that are there on the server, I could use netstat -tuln, and that would give me the details output. We also use plunt, which is a simplified version of knowing the thing. We just add the character p over there, and we'll get a similar output. And plant is something which network administrators find it easy to remember what the netstat options should be used for. Here, if you see, we are able to get both TCP as well as UDP connections. Now, if you don't want TCP and you only want UDP, you could just remove the T over there, and this would give you all the UDP connections. If you don't want the UDP connections and you only want the TCP connections, you could replace or remove the U and add T, and this would give you a detailed list of all connections. Now, if you want to see the statistics of all the connections, you could do a -s, and this would give you the basic statistics that are available on your network interface card. So you see that forwarding for IP, there are two forwardings. a lot of things are happening. We have 5 active TCP connections as of now. We have 311 UDP connections or UDP packets that are received. Now, because UDP is not a two-way acknowledgement kind of a network, we only have what we have received so far on the UDP network. Now, if you want to see the routing tables that are available on the operating system itself, you could use -r. So this is the default route table that we already have on the operating system. So this is how netstat command is used on a day-to-day basis. Of all of these options that we have seen, the personal favorite that I use is PLUNT, which would give me a list of all active UDP and TCP connections along with the local address, that is the port number which they are using, and if there are any connections which have been initiated, we would also be getting the ephemeral port numbers that we have. Let me run the same netstat command on my local Windows server, and you would see that if I just run netstat, it would give me a detailed list of all the things that are happening on my network interface card of my Windows server. So all the addresses that you see here in the local address is the addresses which are being used to establish the connection. The foreign address is the address where the connection is being established to. If you see, for example, in this we are connected to 20.198.118.190 on 443, that is HTTPS, and the local local IP or the local port from which we are connecting is 49878. The next command that we would be using today is telnet. Telnet command is a command line tool used to connect to remote system using the telnet protocol. Telnet is a network protocol that allows you to connect to remote system over the internet and perform various tasks such as sending emails, transferring files, and running remote commands. Here is a few examples of how you could use telnet command. You just have to say telnet space the server details. If you want to try telnet on a specific port number, you could say telnet the server details. It could either be the host name or the IP address and the port number. Let's look at a very quick example of how we could look at the telnet command as well. So I'm currently on this VM of mine. I'll clear the screen. I could say telnet, I could say google.com, and I could use the port number as 443. Now if you see, as soon as I type telnet google.com 443, the prompt that I get is trying to connect to this IP address. Now this IP address is what is provided by the DNS. So this is the Google's IP address that we are getting, and you get a prompt saying that connected to google.com. That means that there is no firewall issue happening at our end which allows us to connect to google.com. But if I do the same thing on 1433, you would see that here it is trying to connect to this particular IP address, but I have not got a confirmation that it was able to connect to google.com. In this scenario, if you only see trying in the prompt, that means that the connection was not able to establish. Now in this reason, it is because 1443 is the port number for Microsoft SQL Server and Google is no SQL Server, so we would not be able to connect to the google.com website on 1433. But I could definitely connect to the Google website on port number 80. So as you see, we already have got a confirmation that it was able to connect to google.com. The same thing is applicable for all troubleshooting steps. This kind of a troubleshooting is very beneficial if you are working on a client which is trying to connect to a server. The server could be a Windows machine, a Linux server, any other server which is actively listening on a particular port. For example, if you are trying to log into a PostgreSQL server and you are not able to get to the login prompt, you could definitely try a telnet, the host name and the port number 5432 and see if you are able to connect to the PostgreSQL server using the telnet command. Now, if you are able to connect to the server with that command, that means that there is no network related issue at your end, and maybe you could focus your troubleshooting on the user account that you are using to log into the PostgreSQL server. So this is how you could use the triology of ifconfig or IP to get the details of the server to which you want to connect. You could then use netstat to see if you have already established a connection from your local machine to that particular server, and use telnet at the end to see if you are able to connect to the server on that particular port number. So these three commands would be very helpful for you. The awk or the awk command is a powerful command line tool in Linux that allows you to process and manipulate text fields. It is particularly useful for working with structured data such as a CSV file or logs. The basic syntax of the awk command is as follows. You could type in awk space a certain set of pattern and an action that you would like to do with it, and the name of the file that you would like to read through, where pattern is a regular expression that specifies which line to match, and action is a set of commands to perform on the matched lines. Here are few examples of how awk can be used. If you want to print the second field of a CSV file, you could say awk-f. Because it's a CSV file, you could use the delimiter as comma, and then you could ask it to print $2, which is the second field of the file.csv. If you want to print the number of lines in a file, you could say awk single inverted commas, you could say end print nr and the file inside the curly braces, and you would be able to get the number of lines in a file. Now, if you want to print all lines containing a specific word, where like the word, you could say awk. You could type in the word that you want to print, and then you could say print $0, which will print the entire line for you. If you want to print the average of all numbers in a file, you could simply say awk sum plus equal to $1. That means it would add all the numbers, and depending upon the number of the numbers that are there, it would then divide the sum that we get. You can also use awk with different delimiters instead of using white space as a delimiter. Awk-f, and then you could use a pipe as a delimiter this time. In the previous example, you saw that we use comma as a delimiter. In this case, we are using a pipe as a delimiter. Awk is also capable of having conditional statements. So we could use if-else statements in the awk to perform different actions based on certain conditions. For example, you can print only the lines that contain a specific word, or print messages based on the value of a field. In this example that we see here, this would print $0, which is the entire line, if $2, that is the second field in that line, is greater than 10. So if it is less than 10, it would not be printing any of these stuff, but if it is greater than 10, it would definitely be printing the lines which are matching the condition, that is field number 2 is greater than 10. We can also have loops, that is for and while loops, in the awk command. For example, you can print the sum of all numbers in a file, or replace all occurrences of a word with another word. So you could simply say for I is equal to 1, I is less than or equal to nf, that is the number of records. We could say I plus plus, so it would give me a sum of all the things. Counting the number of occurrences of a specific word is also possible. So you could use the below example. So it would give us number of occurrences of a specific word using this statement. If you want to replace all occurrences of a specific word with another word, you could just say awk. You could use g substitute or g sub. You first have to enter the old word and then the new word with which you want to change the stuff. But you should be aware that this would not actually be changing the exact file. It would just be giving you the formatted output on the terminal. Now you could also do some kind of a sorting of the lines of the file by a specific field. So you could use the sort command to do that. You could sum of the values of a specific column in a CSV file. So you could definitely add up all the values, maybe to get the total lag in a Kafka process. So you could do that kind of stuff, which would give you a detailed output of the files. If you would like to extract all the IP addresses from a log file, so this command that you see would be very helpful. You could definitely check this command on a log file which contains the IP addresses. If you want to merge multiple files into one, you could use the below awk command. Let's look at a practical demo of how awk can be used. We would be reviewing the most used scenarios in this demo. For this, I would be going into my VirtualBox environment. So I would be logging into my terminal, which is this. As you see, I'm already logged into this terminal and we already have some files. Let me just remove the files. I'll first be entering a normal file, so that is file 1 dot, let's say a CSV file, and we would quickly add up or put some numbers into it. So let's say I'll go into the insert mode. Let me see if I'm able to save this or not, or else I would use it from a, or else I would have to use the sudo privileges on it. So I'll say num, I will say name, I'll say status. Let's say the num is 10, the name is daily, the status is city. Let's say it is Mumbai, the status is also city for this. Let's say this is this, I'll say Chennai, this is also a city. Let's say Varanasi, I'll say this to be a town, and let's save it. Now please, so let's do cat for this, and you would see that we already have a list of all the. Now if you only want to see the second row, that is the name of the cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Varanasi, you could use the command awk-f. I'll use the delimiter as comma, and I would say print $2 from file1.csv. Now you see that we got all the list of all the lines in column 2 as we saw. Now if you want to print column 3, that is the status, we could say that it is a city or a town. Or else if you want to look at the number, you could say this. If you say $0, this would print you the exact file, that is the entire line would be printed for us. Here in this example, if you see, if I have to print the number in the num column is greater than 12, I have to use this following command, that is awk. If $1 is greater than 12, it would then print the entire thing as we speak. Now in this particular example, even if you see that even if we enter $0 or $1, awk on Ubuntu is actually printing the entire line. Now if you would like to see the output with the sum of all the values that are there in column 1, you could say awk-f. We'll use the comma separation. Because this is a CSV file, we will be using the delimiter as comma. Then we could say sum plus equal to $1. This would add all the values in column 1, and we could print the sum at the end. As you see, we are getting the sum as 46, which is what we would be getting if we were to add all the values in column 1 of the file. So in this way, we could use the awk command for various purposes. For churning the output in such a way that we could make some sense out of it, or else to use the output as an input file so that we could then send the input as some variables in the file. Awk is a very important command which is used on a daily basis by millions of Linux administrators who are troubleshooting real world scenarios on a day-to-day basis.
The htop command is an interactive program that monitors system resources and server processes in real time. It is available in most Linux distributions and can be installed using different package managers. Compared to the top command, htop has many improvements and additional features such as mouse operations and visual indicators. To use it, run the following commands. You could say htop. We could also use some options. Options are -d shows the delay between the updates in 10th of a second. -C would give you a no color monochromatic view of the output. -h would display the help message and exit. Let's look at the practical for this. For this, I would be going into my Ubuntu server that's running on my virtual machine. I'll say htop, and this would give you a better visually helpful way of looking at the stuff. So if you see, my CPU is just hovering around 1 to 1.5%. The memory is bit consumed. We have consumed about 165 megabytes of memory out of 1.9, that is 2 GB allocated to it. The swap is also very less, and we also have a list of IDs that you already have. And with the mouse, I could also figure out and point out the resources, and I could also get into individual things like this. So I could also go into filters using the function F4 commands and stuff like that, and this would take me to a lot of other things. When compared to the top command, the top command gives you a very holistic picture of an old school way of showing you the resource utilization. This also shows the exact same things, but htop command would give you a very pictorial representation of how this can be seen on a very good manner. So you could also select memory, and this would actually give you a list of all the filters using the memory which is using most of the memory. You could also filter using which is using most of the CPU. Similarly, you could just filter out using the process IDs or the user who is executing it and stuff like that. You could also filter out services which are running from the very beginning. So as you see, the root, the process ID 1, which is the first process ID which is actually started when a Linux server comes up, is the one which is running for the most amount of time. So this is about the htop command. So the process status or PS command produces a snapshot of all the running processes in your system. The static results are taken from a virtual file in the /proc file system. Executing the PS command without an option or argument will list the running processes in the shell along with the PID, the TTY, that is the type of terminal, and the running time, and the command which was used to launch the process.
Some of the acceptable options that can be used is -t, -u and -a. We obviously would be using some other flags. So let's quickly jump into this and I'll clear the screen. I'll just run ps and this would give me the basic options that I have. So these are the two shells that are actually running at the time of recording. If I say ps-ef, so this would give me a very elaborate list of all the things that are running. So as you see, this is the user which was used to run it. This is the PID that was used to run it. That is the time from which it has been up and the system command or the actual command line that was used to run the process. So a very small example would be if I say sleep for 1000 seconds and give you an ampersand, and if I do a ps-ef this time, you would see that my sleep command is running with the process ID 49954. And as you see, this is the exact same PID that we got when we ran this with ampersand. Now, if you're not aware of what ampersand is doing over here, strongly recommend you to watch one of our older videos wherein we discuss jobs in Linux, which is using the ampersand sign to run this command in the background. So this is about the ps command, very useful in getting the services. And once we get the process ID from the ps command, we could use the kill -9 command that we have also discussed earlier to kill the process. And if you see, now we would not be having a ps-ef with the sleep command. So this has already killed the command. So this is where ps-ef is extensively used on a day-to-day basis for all Linux administrators to see which processes are running on the server. That's it for this video, guys. I hope you like this short and quick video. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, request you to hit the subscribe button, which would encourage us to make more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. Keep having a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.